Joss, and she just nailed it today in a spectacular way. I think we're all kind of thrilled.
In the innovative world of guitar mastery stood a perfectionist with musical preferences as unorthodox as his playing style. Jeff Beck, the virtuoso celebrated as one of rock's most extraordinary instrumentalists, wasn't only a groundbreaking guitarist who fused blues, rock, jazz, and fusion into something entirely his own. He was also a man who analyzed other bands with an intensity that often bordered on scientific fixation.
Really,
I saw him with John McLaughlin way back.
He's just loving it.
I don't know any other drummer that becomes part of it.
Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of Music Rivalry Exposed, where today we explore the captivating story of Jeff Beck and the 6 bands that reportedly consumed his creative imagination. The London-born legend behind unforgettable tracks like Beck's Bolero and A Day in the Life was defined by his relentless quest for musical perfection, a pursuit that frequently led him into controversial territory. Every great guitarist is really just a great listener, Beck is said to have explained to Guitar Player magazine in 1975. The real difference between being good and being great is how deeply you study what came before. And study he certainly did, sometimes to such extremes that it unsettled fellow musicians and puzzled die-hard rock traditionalists. From whispered confrontations at exclusive dinner parties to subtle borrowings woven into recordings, Beck's connections with these bands revealed not only personal fixations, but also larger questions about the very nature of artistic growth. Some of these influences were embraced openly. Others were whispered about in studios or dismissed outright by critics, yet all of them contributed to shaping the guitarist who redefined what 6 strings could truly achieve. So tune your Stratocaster and get ready, because we're counting down the 6 bands that reportedly drove Jeff Beck to near obsession. The names may shock you, and the stories behind them will absolutely challenge everything you thought you knew about guitar heroism. 6. The Ventures. Starting off our countdown at number 6 is a band that might surprise a lot of people, The Ventures. Known as pioneers of surf rock instrumentals, they carved out their legacy with twangy guitars, heavy reverb, and melodies that could stand on their own without a single lyric. At first glance, they might not seem like the kind of group that would inspire someone as complex and experimental as Jeff Beck, but that's exactly why their influence mattered so much.
And as we became friends, we started getting together.
Beck's fascination with the Ventures reportedly began in 1960 when he first heard their breakout hit Walk Don't Run blasting across pirate radio stations in England. At a time when the British rock scene was still in its infancy, Beck was struck by how powerful their music sounded without a frontman delivering vocals. According to music journalist Chris Welch, Beck once told his Yardbirds bandmates, "These guys proved you don't need lyrics to tell a story. Every note counts when there's nowhere to hide." That remark didn't just stay in the rehearsal room. Welch claimed it quickly circulated through London's tight-knit music community, cementing the Ventures as a hidden obsession of one of Britain's rising guitar stars. What really captivated Beck wasn't just the catchy surf riffs, but what the Ventures represented in a larger sense. At the time, most British musicians were fixated on American blues and R&B vocalists. Bands were being formed around singers, not guitarists. Yet here was a group that flipped that formula completely, proving that the guitar itself could carry an entire song, becoming the storyteller rather than the background instrument. For a young Beck, this was a revelation. There's a kind of honesty in instrumental music, Beck reportedly told Melody Maker in 1965. Although he never mentioned the Ventures directly, those close to him believed the comment was a clear nod in their direction. You can't hide behind clever words or catchy choruses. To Beck, instrumental music was pure. Every bend, every tremolo, every moment of silence mattered more because the guitar was the voice. Though the Ventures and Beck never shared a stage or worked together in the studio, their influence was undeniable. During a 1967 recording session, witnesses claimed Beck became fixated on recreating their lush, reverb-soaked guitar tone. He supposedly spent hours with engineers experimenting with different amps, springs, and room setups, finally telling his producer, "This is what guitars are supposed to sound like in wide-open spaces." It was less about copying their sound and more about capturing the same spirit of clarity and atmosphere that defined the Ventures' best work. Even if the Ventures themselves never fully realized the depth of Beck's admiration, their fingerprints were all over his approach to music. They showed him that you didn't need flash or over-the-top theatrics to make the guitar sing. For Beck, they represented his core values as a musician: precision over showmanship, melody over noise, and a belief that the guitar could communicate emotions more powerfully than any words ever could. 5. Cream. Coming in at number 5 is Cream, the powerhouse trio of Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker. Together, they rewrote the rules of late 60s rock.
Yes, we party on the cut line.
creating a sound so massive that it felt like more than 3 people could possibly produce. Their fiery improvisations, extended jams, and sheer volume turned them into one of the first true supergroups. But while the world saw them as groundbreaking, Jeff Beck's feelings were far more complicated. When Beck stepped in to replace Clapton in the Yardbirds, Cream was just forming.
He was more of a big band swing drummer with all the chops going on.
Yeah. That timing placed Beck and Clapton on parallel but divergent paths. Clapton was moving toward louder, more aggressive blues rock with Bruce and Baker, while Beck was carving out his own lane defined by precision, control, and experimentation. Beck's critique of Cream was blunt and uncompromising. Eric's got the volume, but he's missing the finesse. Power without precision is just noise. Both guitarists were exploring distortion, feedback, and ways to push the blues beyond its traditional boundaries. Both were innovators. But where Clapton and Cream leaned into brute force, stacking amplifiers and letting sheer volume dominate the experience, Beck preferred a more surgical approach. He wanted every note to matter, every tone to have shape and direction. As he once remarked, musical evolution requires subtlety, not just bigger amplifiers. That contrast reflected not just musical differences, but philosophical ones. Cream embodied the idea of breaking barriers with raw energy, feeding off the chaos of live performance. Beck, on the other hand, saw music as a craft where precision and innovation mattered more than overwhelming the listener. To him, Cream's sound sometimes crossed the line from artistry into excess, and yet, despite the criticism, there was admiration too. Beck wasn't blind to their power. When Cream disbanded in 1968 after just 2 explosive years, Beck reportedly acknowledged their achievement, saying, "Eric finally figured out when to stop." Years later, he even admitted, "Cream taught me that sometimes you need to get loud to get quiet." It was a rare moment of respect from a man who seldom offered compliments lightly. In the end, Cream served as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale for Beck. They showed how a band could conquer arenas and define an era through sheer force of sound, but also reminded him of the dangers of letting subtlety get buried beneath the noise. For Beck, their legacy was proof that raw power could thrill the masses, but only precision could truly elevate music into art. 4. The Yardbirds. At number 4, we have the Yardbirds, the band that didn't just influence Jeff Beck's career, but completely changed the course of his life. Beck first encountered them in 1963, when Eric Clapton was still holding down the lead guitar spot. Watching from the audience, Beck's reaction was direct and brutally honest.
I have done other music after the Yardbirds, but anyway, somebody told me I should be proud tonight.
That's exactly what I want to do, but better. For a guitarist already obsessed with pushing sound into uncharted territory, the Yardbirds represented both an opportunity and a challenge. Not long after, fate came calling. Clapton departed, and Beck was invited to step into his shoes, an offer that catapulted him straight into the center of London's exploding blues rock scene. To Beck, it was like inheriting a finely tuned race car. You respect what came before, but you want to see how fast it can really go. But with that opportunity came immense pressure. Fans and critics alike expected him to honor Clapton's established style, while Beck himself burned with the desire to create something new. His bandmates recalled that in early rehearsals, Beck would carefully run through Clapton's solos note for note, not as imitation, but as foundation. Then, almost like an architect demolishing part of a structure to rebuild it stronger, he would twist those familiar lines into something no one had heard before. As he explained, some foundations you build on, some you tear down and rebuild. This constant push and pull between tradition and innovation, between respect and rebellion, defined not just his time in the Yardbirds, but his entire career. Within the group, Beck pioneered feedback, distortion, and sustain, turning the guitar into more than just an instrument. It became a weapon, a voice, a tool for chaos and beauty. The Yardbirds gave him the platform to experiment, but also the burden of expectation. And Beck thrived on that tension. Ultimately, his tenure with the Yardbirds symbolized one of his lifelong themes, the delicate balance between preserving what came before and destroying it to make way for something greater. It was here, in the crucible of the Yardbirds, that Jeff Beck began carving out his reputation not only as a guitarist, but as a fearless innovator who refused to be boxed in by anyone else's legacy. 3. King Crimson. At number 3, we find King Crimson, the progressive rock pioneers whose arrival in 1969 sent shockwaves through the music world. Their debut album, In the Court of the Crimson King, didn't just impress Jeff Beck, it left him absolutely stunned.
Open themselves to this relationship with music, and for that, One needs a discipline.
Listening to those sprawling, otherworldly tracks, Beck reportedly said, they took all the safety out of rock music. Every chord change is like stepping off a cliff. What gripped Beck wasn't just the sound, but the philosophy behind it. Unlike most bands of the time who still leaned on verse-chorus structures, King Crimson refused to play it safe. They used jagged rhythms, unconventional harmonies, and complex time signatures that baffled even seasoned musicians. These weren't simply songs, they were labyrinths of sound, designed to challenge both player and listener at every turn. Beck, always searching for the next boundary to break, became fascinated. According to accounts from his bandmates, he even tried learning King Crimson's material during rehearsals, but the complexity left his own group confused and frustrated. It was as though Beck was chasing something just beyond his grasp, music that demanded a different kind of discipline than rock traditionally required. His admiration for King Crimson went beyond imitation. In 1972, Beck reportedly approached members of the band about a potential collaboration. Their response was cool, even dismissive. Jeff's technique is impressive, but our music requires a different kind of mathematical thinking. For Beck, who prided himself on his unmatched skill, this rejection hit hard. Rather than sulk, he used it as fuel. Friends and colleagues noted that after the encounter, Beck plunged into music theory with a new intensity, determined to understand the structures and patterns that Crimson had mastered. It wasn't about copying them. It was about stretching his own limits to meet the challenge. King Crimson represented something crucial for Jeff Beck, the idea that music could strip away every safety net, forcing both musician and audience into the unknown. For a perfectionist like Beck, they were the ultimate test, proof that even the greatest guitarist could be humbled, rattled, and inspired all at once. 2. The Beatles. Taking the runner-up spot are the Beatles, not rivals of Jeff Beck, but a source of profound admiration. To Beck, they weren't just another successful band. They were proof that popular music could evolve into something closer to high art. His fascination really took hold in 1966 with the release of Revolver. That album changed everything. After hearing it for the first time, Beck marveled, they're not just making songs anymore, they're building sonic architectures.
I thought it might have been the Beatles. And I look in there as a bench with about 20 guitar players there with all their cases.
For a guitarist obsessed with pushing boundaries, this was a revelation. The Beatles had found a way to transform 3-minute tracks into intricate soundscapes. What drew Beck in most was their fearless studio experimentation. He was captivated by the way George Martin and the band were layering instruments, manipulating tape loops, and reshaping guitars until they sounded like entire orchestras. Guitars aren't supposed to sound like orchestras, but somehow they made it work, Beck observed. For someone constantly searching for new textures, it was like hearing the future. By 1968, Beck was recording his own projects at Abbey Road, right as the Beatles were working on their later sessions with Martin. Staff and engineers recalled him spending long hours in conversation with the studio team, peppering them with questions about the Beatles' methods, how they achieved backward recordings, tape delays, and layered harmonies that felt almost impossible to replicate. To his own bandmates, Beck explained what he was learning in philosophical terms. Some musicians perform music, some musicians sculpt it. The really great ones do both. It was a statement that summed up exactly what he admired about the Beatles. They weren't just playing songs, they were constructing entire worlds of sound. For Beck, the Beatles validated a belief he already carried, that imagination and innovation mattered as much as technical mastery. They proved that rock music could evolve into something radically different, something that challenged audiences and musicians alike. Their influence confirmed to him that the guitar, and the studio itself, could be limitless tools of creativity. 1. The Shadows. And finally, at number 1, The Shadows, the band that, more than any other, shaped Jeff Beck's entire approach to guitar playing. It all started back in 1960 when a teenage Beck tuned into Radio Luxembourg and heard Apache for the very first time. That single moment, with its shimmering tremolo lines, hit him like a lightning bolt. Hank Marvin's sound wasn't just catchy, it became the foundation of Beck's entire melodic philosophy. He realized then that a guitar could be a storyteller all on its own. Hank Marvin himself would later acknowledge Beck's fixation, admitting Jeff was obsessed with our tremolo technique. He understood melody in ways most rock guitarists never would. That obsession turned into the blueprint for Beck's own career. Those early Shadows records left such a deep mark that Beck carried their influence into every stage of his development. During his Yardbirds years, while the band was driving hard into heavy blues and feedback experimentation, Beck would still slip in Shadow-style melodic passages, clean, reverb-soaked lines that stood out amid the chaos. It was his way of reminding audiences that melody could cut through even the loudest walls of sound. Bassist John Paul Jones recalled Beck saying before one gig, "Tonight they'll understand that guitars can sing without words," and it didn't stop there. Decades later, even after pioneering fusion, redefining rock guitar, and earning the respect of legends, Beck's admiration for the Shadows remained undiminished. Reflecting on Marvin's influence, he said, "Hank's technically brilliant, sure, but more importantly, he taught me that every note should mean something." Has any other guitarist made instrumentals your grandmother and your girlfriend both love equally? Music should communicate, not just demonstrate. For Beck, the Shadows weren't just an influence. They were proof that simplicity, when delivered with precision and soul, could outlast any trend. They gave him the conviction that melody mattered most, and that principle stayed at the heart of his playing until the very end. So there you have it, the 6 bands that captured Jeff Beck's imagination and shaped his genius. Now it's your turn. Which of these influences shocked you the most? Was it his lifelong devotion to the Shadows, or his fascination with King Crimson's daring complexity? Maybe it was his relentless curiosity about the Beatles that caught you off guard. Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss more untold stories from the wild, unpredictable world of rock history.